After a historic win by Charles Leclerc around the streets of Monaco, F1 now heads to the streets of Montreal in Canada. Can it live up to the hype? Will it rain? Probably. And will we see on the track this weekend? Let's talk about it. What's going on, guys? I'm Dakota, and welcome to our 2024 Canadian Grand Prix predictions. It's a video we like to do before every F1 race weekend where we make our predictions on what's going to happen that weekend in F1. We make predictions on our biggest positive surprise, our biggest disappointment, our qualifying top three, our race podium, and of course, we end on one crazy prediction. And if you are interested in having your predictions, viewed on the video, you'll see a black box as we go along down at the bottom of the screen, including our community's predictions and what they think is going to happen. If you're interested in joining in on those predictions, head to the link in below in the description to join the Discord. And then every week leading up to the next Grand Prix weekend, I'll make a call for predictions, and we'd love chatting about it and seeing who gets the most right that week. And we have a little bit of a running championship going to see who over the course of a season can make the most predictions correctly. But nonetheless, let's go ahead, let's get this thing started with our biggest positive surprise. Kicking things off with my pick for biggest positive surprise, I have gone a little bit of a different direction in a team that I think is going the wrong way with what they would consider a success to start this 2024 season. And we're turning to the green machine of Aston Martin because my pick for biggest positive surprise is Fernando Alonso. Fernando finished on the podium here in Canada last year. Obviously, the Aston Martin was in a much different place last year at this time than it is right now. Aston Martin has even admitted to themselves that they don't quite understand and are frustrated with the direction that the team seems to be moving, with other teams like Ferrari and McLaren making strides to more closely challenge Red Bull. Aston Martin obviously is sliding a little bit further back and has struggled the last couple of race weekends. But that said, I'm going very granular here, and my pick for biggest positive surprise is Fernando Alonso, of course. And I think it's time we saw a true Fernando masterclass. Obviously, Canada has been on the calendar for a very long time, and I think Fernando usually does very well at tracks where he has a lot of experience, and I think Canada definitely, suits him. We saw him perform here very well last year, and we know that the Aston Martin isn't the best car on the grid, or the second best car, or the third best car, maybe not even the fourth best car. But that said, I do think it's about time we finally see a good weekend from Fernando Alonso from start to finish, and I think this is the weekend that we're gonna get it. So Fernando, don't let me down, Fernando. I know you're listening to this, Fernando. Don't let me down, because you're my pick for biggest positive surprise. Moving right along to our prediction for biggest disappointment, and for me, we're not going too far down the grid because my pick for biggest disappointment is Lance Stroll. I think a lot of the times that we've seen this season, it really feels like Lance is kind of slid under the radar when he has some stinkers, and I think we saw that a little bit in Monaco last time out. But I think going into his home race, I think we may see it a little bit more, especially with weather playing a factor, and especially with the top half of the grid, and even the upper midfield to like midfield also making strides with teams like VCarb or whatever they're going by this year, and Haas and Williams and even Alpine scoring a point here recently. So I do think that it's going to get interesting, and I think that for whatever reason, I think just for the same reason I think Fernando is going to do well, I think it's just we're also just kind of due for a Lance stinker, and what better weekend than the one that's coming up for Fernando to do very, very well and his own teammates to continue to just disappoint in the grand scheme of things, especially with the in lieu of some of the driver lineup announcements that were announced recently. Not to date this recording, but Sergio Perez was officially extended for 2 years in his Red Bull seat. So in a conversation that revolves around drivers staying in positions where they may or may not deserve to be, I think Lance is just kind of the bad vibes are just out in that situation. And so I'm sorry, Lance. I don't want it to be true because I really don't like making very pointed predictions and vibe picks for biggest disappointment, but I can't help myself this weekend. So I'm sorry, Lance, but you're my pick for biggest disappointment. Let's turn these predictions now to Saturday, qualifying day here in Canada. And this is where my predictions are starting to chef it up a little bit in a week where a lot of safe predictions were made by my community. Admittedly so, if you're in the Discord. I decided to sprinkle a little bit of sauce on the old prediction machine, and it came out with this top 3 here in qualifying. Starting in P3, I have gone for our most recent race winner, Charles Leclerc, to finish P3. Obviously, qualifying, I think, is one of his better attributes, and I do think this P3 is going to be a very well done job by Charles, but I think there's just going to be not enough in this particular instance, and I think Charles will come home to finish here in P3 in qualifying. A very good, respectable finish for him in qualifying. I don't think anybody would be too disappointed about that, maybe outside of himself. But I think Charles is going to come home and finish P3. Moving on to P2, I have gone for Max Verstappen. That's right. I think it's about time we start talking about Max Verstappen not taking pole position and not doing particularly well in the races. Over the last couple of race weekends, we've seen Red Bull really struggle to get up to speed in terms of the rest of the grid. Do I think it's going to continue? I don't think it's going to continue. But at the same time, I think we've officially moved past my qualifying always have Max posted up on pole position until someone else can routinely beat him shtick. And we've moved past it because now we have seen that someone has, outdone him a few race weekends in a row here. And I think not a couple in a row, but I think we have seen that he has been quite off the pace and Red Bull has been struggling. And so I think this is an opportunity for the rest of the grid to kind of, shake things up potentially. And I think we might see it start on Saturday. But that leaves the ultimate question: who is going to take pole position this weekend in Canada? I have gone for a man who's been driving absolutely off the charts for a long while this season. I think a lot of this season he's been driving particularly well. He's just been mighty unlucky at times fighting with a certain Spaniard. It's Oscar Piastri. That's right. I have the Aussie teenager, young adult, taking pole position this weekend in Canada because he has been driving very, very, very well. And if it wasn't for a few unlucky moments and a few race weekends past that caused him damage to fall down the order, I think we would see an absolutely unprecedented run from Oscar this season. And we even saw it, last time out in Monaco. He's, qualified P2, was on the pace from the jump in qualifying, and then finished P2 and held off a charging Carlos Sainz for 78 laps on the same tires. And I think Oscar is driving with a lot of confidence right now and in a McLaren that looks to have some pretty decent pace, even over a single lap. And I think that Canada, it might just come all together for him. And I think we see Oscar Piastri take pole position. Before we move on to our predictions for the race podium, if you haven't already, subscribe down below if you're a big fan of F1 or sim racing content. I do this F1 series because I enjoy watching it, and it's a fun thing to talk about in our little community here. So subscribe if you haven't below. And as we go through our predictions, leave a comment down below what your predictions are for Canada this weekend. I love hearing what people are thinking is going to happen, whether your predictions are fueled entirely by fandom or if you want to get very analytical with it to try and predict exactly down to the millimeter of who's going to finish where and by how much time. I would love to know what your guys' predictions are, so let me know down in the comment section below. All right, here we are, our picks for the race podium around Montreal. Let's start in P3, bottom step of the podium. We are going for a prediction of P3, Lando Norris. I do think that Lando is going to be up there in qualifying. I do think Oscar has definitely had the pace on Lando here recently, but I do think Lando is still driving very, very well. Obviously, he got his first win in Miami and has followed it up with a couple of solid weekends out, finishing just off the podium. But at the same time, I do think it's about time we see Lando back on the podium once again. And so I've gotten Lando Norris as P3 in my predictions here in Canada. And that leads us on to my pick for P2 here in Canada, and that is Charles Leclerc. I think Charles is going to come home to finish P2 in this one. I do think the Ferrari actually has taken a lot of strides since they've started bringing some upgrades, and I think this is actually going to be the battle that's going to be the most interesting in this one. Trying to see which Lando or Charles is going to finish second in this one, because I think it could be a lot more even than people imagine. Particularly because who I have at P1 might inform a lot. But I do think Charles is going to be another very good weekend. Follow up his Monaco win with a very, very solid outing to come home and finish P2 and try and keep his long shot title fight in a long shot at the title fight in view. And so I think he'll come to finish in P2. And that leaves us only with my pick for the winner of the Canadian Grand Prix, Max Verstappen. I do think it's about time we see Max win again, and as unfortunate as it is, I do think that Oscar might have a bit of a moment in this one. He's had a couple of good weekends in a row, but at the same time, he's been extremely unlucky this year, and I just have a feeling with the potential weather factor, if we get a wet to dry or dry to wet session, if someone gets a little out of sync, something could happen, and unfortunately, I'm just not sure. I'm not necessarily predicting that Oscar is going to DNF from the race, but I do think there could be external factors, a la like we saw in Miami, where he was extremely unlucky with a safety car to finish off the podium, or to finish down the order in Miami. I think we could see something similar here, particularly with the weather that seems to be forecasted. Definitely an opportunity for potentially some wet sessions that may put him a little out of position and get some very unlucky timing. But I do have Max Verstappen winning this race. I do think that with the potential unluckiness that Oscar runs into, I think Max will be right there to take advantage. And I do think that Red Bull is having issues, but at the same time, they're still at the front of the grid. I mean, an issue for a Red Bull is still very much enough to win a Grand Prix, and I think we're going to see it this weekend. So as much as I hate to say it, I have Max Verstappen winning the Canadian Grand Prix. All right, we've reached the summit, our one crazy prediction. This is our chance to get a little crazy, to talk about something that may not happen all too often, something that might be a little out there, and it's time to make my prediction. My prediction involves the Williams boys. The two of the drivers that are definitely closest to my heart on this grid, and my one crazy prediction, in which I don't think we've seen this particular inference of this prediction. I think we have seen it, but it was a little asterisk-y, and so I do think this is the weekend, though. I think this is the time. Ready? Logan Sargent will out-qualify Alex Albon on pace. What did he say? Yes, I think Logan, this is entirely a vibes pick, as I think all one crazy predictions should be. I searched deep in my heart, and I went, you know what? It's time. Logan Sargent out-qualifies Alex Albon on pace alone. None of this losing a lap time for Alex and him dropping below Logan. I think Logan Sargent is going to out-qualify Alex Albon on pace. If that's not a crazy prediction, I don't know what is. Let me know down in the comment section below what your one crazy prediction would be. But there we are. What do you think? Guys, that is going to do it for us here. Our predictions for Canada this weekend. I say it every one of these videos, and I'm so excited for this weekend. There really is nothing like an F1 race weekend, even though the races sometimes end up being some stinkers. At the same time, the excitement level leading up to a Grand Prix weekend is bar none, in my opinion. And even with the 500 now gone, the Coke 600 now gone, and Le Mans just over the hill in the distance, I think even just like a random race weekend in Canada still hits pretty good. But what do you think is going to happen this weekend? Let me know your predictions down in the comment section below. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a like to help me out with the almighty algorithm. It really helps me out. And turn on notifications so you don't miss a single upload from me. But guys, what do you think is going to happen this weekend? I'm hoping we get a good one, especially after Monaco last time out. But unfortunately, that's going to wrap it up for me here, guys. We'll be back after the race weekend concludes with a race recap video. But until then, guys, I'll see you in the next one.